Hello class. This week we are going to talk about chapters 3 and 4, and you'll see those on the echo recording from the on-site class. I just wanted to give you a quick overview of some of the things we'll be covering. If you go to the text and you start on page 75, you'll see that attitudes are really a key concept in chapter 3. What they are, the three components of them, we're going to talk about those. And attitudes really can make a difference as to how someone feels about themselves and about the organization. As we move over to page 76, cognitive dissonance is a wonderful term. And all it means is that when someone really thinks through what they're doing and says, you know what, this is not working out the way I wanted it to be a certain way, but now it's this way. So there's a dissonance or separation. There's a difference in what you wanted versus what's happening. That's how the concept is going to be approached in this chapter. So what affects attitudes? We're going to be talking about that as well. As we go on and we talk about attitudes, guess what? They're also part of people's jobs. In other words, what's your attitude about your job? What attitude do other people have about their jobs? That's going to affect how you guys are going to work together. So it really is important to understand how people think, why they think a certain way, and how you can get them to think in a manner that is productive for everybody involved. So if you look on page 78, you'll start to see some differences. For example, job involvement, employee engagement, power distance. We'll be talking about a lot of these things, and employee engagement is really the level of enthusiasm and commitment that an employee has to the organization. We'll be talking about that. Let's look at job satisfaction on page 80. We'll be talking about job satisfaction. The worst jobs of 2013 for job satisfaction is on page 81. And as you can see, that dates this book substantially. So if anybody wants to go out there and look at the worst jobs for 2018, hey, you'll be able to give us some insight into that. How do you measure job satisfaction? How do we determine that people are happy in their jobs? We're going to talk about those things, as well as how satisfied are people. You know, people can go to work every day and hate the job they have. It's very realistic to understand and know that that could happen. Also on page 82, it was kind of cute. An OB poll was happy places. How many people are happy where they work? On page 83, the average levels of employee job satisfaction by country. This is an interesting thing that we'll look at as we go through the chapter. Also, what causes job satisfaction? So if we look on 83 at the bottom, job conditions. Why do your job conditions affect your satisfaction with your job? And we'll address those. Your personality on page 84. Some people are never happy, no matter what you give them. So you have to think of this, especially as a manager, that you're not going to make all the people happy all of the time. But personality makes a difference. The pay. People are affected by the pay they're getting. Although I will say again, sometimes people make a ton of money and they're still not happy. My point is that there are a myriad of things that help an employee to feel satisfied in their job. It's not just about the money, although I know you're probably thinking that that's what it is. Also, corporate responsibility. Young people especially are looking at companies to do the right thing, to take care of others, to give back to the community. We'll talk about that. And on page 86, there's 3 key outcomes of job satisfaction. So look at job performance. That's one, obviously. The employee's more productive when they're satisfied. The second one on that page is organizational citizenship behavior. People address things appropriately in the organization, look out for the organization, and exhibit a level of citizenship that really makes people feel happy and content with what they're doing. And they also know that if it's not right, somebody cares and is willing to try and see if they can fix it. And the third one is customer satisfaction. And then, of course, life satisfaction. People that are happy at work. You spend most of your life at work. So if you're happy at work, you're usually happy in other things and vice versa. What are the impacts of job dissatisfaction? If we look on page 88, there's 4 different areas that we're going to look at. And if you look at the 4 responses, one is exit, voice, loyalty, and neglect. And we'll talk about the differences in those. The key thing to think of is that when you look at people, for example, exiting, they might leave the organization, but what are they taking with them? Then the people that stay may exhibit other behaviors, and you wish they had gone. So there's all kinds of different ways that these things pan out for, depending on the person. So remember back in chapter 1 and 2, we talked about withdrawal behavior. Well, it's back again, only it's called counterproductive work behavior, and that's on page 89. So we'll be talking about that as well, and think about what that means. Productive, counterproductive. So counter means against. So it's anything that is against or prevents being productive. Remember when I told you that if you want to write about withdrawal behavior, there are a lot of things that come into this. If you look on page 90, one of those is absenteeism. The second one is employee turnover. Those are 2 key things. So think about people who just don't show up for work, and then people who leave their job and go elsewhere. And of course, the manager tells senior management, well, they just weren't a good fit. You've heard that term. They weren't a good fit for the organization. Well, you know what? Maybe the organization was not a good fit for them. So when you go out to get a job, look at what's happening on your side of the world and not just the organization. In other words, do you feel that you are going to be happy there? And think about that before you say yes or no. Okay, so that's chapter 3. Again, the chapter review, questions for a review, are on page 94. These are indicated in the syllabus, but I'm just showing you as we go through the chapters where they are. And there are 7 questions there. So let's go to chapter 4. In this chapter, now we talked about attitudes. Now we're going to talk about emotions and moods. And they are 2 different things. So look on page 103. If you look at emotions and you look at moods, we're going to talk about the differences. We're going to look at the basic emotions, what's out there, and how they affect employees in the workplace. But there is a difference between the 2. Page 105, we're going to talk about moral emotions. In other words, the emotions that you feel when you see people mistreated, when you see a moral indignation, when you see something happening that shouldn't be. Those kinds of things we're going to look at. The structure of mood is on page 106, Exhibit 4.2. You want to look at that. And then the emotional states. This was interesting. This is on page 107. And if you look at different countries, we're toward the top, of course, and we experience emotions more so than other countries. But we'll be talking about that. It's kind of interesting to see which countries hardly have any emotion or exhibit any emotion. The sources of emotions and moods are discussed starting on page 108. So again, we're back to personality. We can also look at the time of day, the day of the week, the weather. Now, the book talks about the fact that weather doesn't really affect anything. I disagree. Anybody live in Michigan? I do. I'm depressed right now. It's freezing cold out. I want it to be at least 32. That would be a heat wave right now. So weather does make a difference. Getting up in darkness, coming home in darkness, going to bed in darkness, waking up in the middle of the night or whenever and not knowing if it's time to get up because it's still dark. So those kinds of things do make a difference. If you look on page 113, we talk about the fact that women can be more emotional than men. They also talk about emotional labor. So what's involved in that? How much effort is put into knowing, understanding, and exhibiting the appropriate emotion? And we'll talk about that. The effective events theory on page 115 is interesting because it gets into the concept of, or the fact that employees, and this happens at home too. One thing you'll find in this class is that I like to relate a lot of the things we're going to talk about to home situations, to your personal life, to life outside of the classroom, because again, this is practical application of concepts presented, which is my goal. So think about how you feel at work if you walk in and everybody's happy and everybody's good and everybody had a great day. You know, it's a rare thing, right? Are you affected by someone who doesn't have a good day, hasn't had a good day, and is more than ready to tell you why they didn't have a good day? Those kinds of things make a difference. So the effective events theory says that people affect our emotions by their emotions. And we'll talk about that. Also, one of my favorite topics on 115 at the bottom, emotional intelligence, which is key. We'll talk about that. Another thing, emotion regulation, that's on page 118. So understanding your emotional intelligence, but then regulating your emotions, not letting people push your buttons. That's what you could call this, okay? That's important. There's some other things they talk about. Again, deviant workplace behaviors are on page 124. But that's the end of chapter 4, and then we've got the questions for review on page 127, and there are 7 of them again. So this is the quickie overview of chapter 3 and 4. You'll be able to view the echo recording after Tuesday when I have the on-site class, and I will talk to you later. Thank you.